In the early hours of May 30, 1981, brothers Sergio and Pablo Schoklender were talking in the living room of the family home. Until at one point, their mother, Cristina, wakes up and also goes to the living room, realizing that Pablo, who had been kicked out of the house and shouldn't be there, hid. Cristina, seeing her son Sergio alone in the living room, asks what he is doing there at that time. The boy just says he wanted to stay on the couch for a while. Cristina then turns her back and goes towards her room, and at that time, the two brothers do something that would become known as the Schoklender family crime, one of the most controversial and famous crimes in Argentina. Mauricio Schoklender was an industrial engineer. He met Cristina Silva Romano on January 11, 1955, in a cafe in the city center when they were both very young. Mauricio belonged to a middle-class Jewish family, while Cristina was Catholic, something that Mauricio's mother did not like. Still, they got married on July 7 of that same year, and soon after moved to the city of Tandil, located in the province of Buenos Aires, where Mauricio got a job at the company Metalúrgica Tandil SA. It was in Tandil that the couple's 3 children were born: Sergio Mauricio on May 30, 1958, Pablo Guillermo on February 6, 1961, and Ana Valeria in 1963. At the beginning of their life together, the couple lived in a humble pension, but little by little their lives improved. Cristina dedicated herself to holding literary meetings at her home and also had a degree in theater. She even acted in some theater plays in Argentina. In 1968, Mauricio started working at a renowned company called Grupo Pittsburgh, so the family moved to the city of Buenos Aires, the country's capital. They settled in an upper middle-class apartment. To outsiders, the Schoklenders were a perfect family, but the truth was that the relationship between them was slowly falling apart. According to some of the family's neighbors, the house they lived in was always dirty and messy. Cristina drank a lot and used to leave her children, who at the time were still young, alone at home. Mauricio, on the other hand, was always highly praised by neighbors and also by people who worked for him, but he seemed apathetic to the whole situation in his house, and according to some sources, he also had a lover. The family had several problems that many did not see. The relationship between Mauricio and Cristina was increasingly frayed, so much so that Cristina took many of her lovers home, with no intention of hiding the betrayals from her husband, and even introduced them to her children. Cristina was an alcoholic and addicted to certain prescription medications. Furthermore, there are reports that she forced relationships with her son Pablo since the boy was 12 years old. As Mauricio was absent, the boy sought comfort from his brother Sergio, who was 3 years older than him. The family's life, despite them having an excellent financial condition, was completely unbalanced. Days before the crime that would forever change the lives of the Schoklender family, some events considered as omens by some people began to happen. On May 14, 1981, Julio de la Hera, a manager who worked in the same company as Mauricio, died after suffering an unexplained accident on the balcony of his home. Although Julio and Mauricio knew each other, authorities later said the case had no connection to the Schoklender family. The following day, May 15th, 15 days before what would happen, some events occurred that left things in the family even more unstable. First, Sergio stole money and documents from his father. Afterwards, Pablo entered his parents' room while they were sleeping and doused the floor with gasoline and then set it on fire. Mauricio and Cristina woke up shortly after and managed to escape unharmed. The fire destroyed the entire bedroom and also part of the residence's hallway. Mauricio, who immediately realized that it was Pablo who started the fire, kicked him out of the house and told him to go live in Uruguay. The family preferred not to involve the authorities so as not to tarnish their name and also not draw negative attention to themselves. It is said that the fire was Pablo's revenge against his mother for what she did to him. Pablo lived in Uruguay for a few months, but then decided to return to Buenos Aires and stayed in a hotel. Apparently, he still had the idea of taking revenge on his mother. Mauricio took action on the property's insurance alleging an accident and did not allow his son to return, considering him unbalanced He was also afraid that the boy would tell him what had happened, and then the insurance would discover that it was not an accident and would not cover the damage to the property. On May 29, 1981, the couple Mauricio and Cristina and their children Sergio and Valeria had dinner together at a restaurant on the city's waterfront. They waited until midnight to toast Sergio, their eldest son, on his 23rd birthday. In addition to celebrating the anniversary, they were also celebrating Mauricio's promotion in which he was named president of the company. While the family was at the restaurant celebrating, Pablo, who was 20 years old at the time, took advantage of their absence and entered the apartment where they lived. At one point, the family returned to the apartment and Pablo, who was still there, when he realized they were arriving, hid in the closet of his brother Sergio's room. Around 3 a.m., Pablo woke up Sergio and they both went to the living room to talk. A few minutes later, Cristina got up. She went to the living room and found Sergio sitting there, and they spoke for a few minutes while Pablo was hiding. As soon as Cristina turned her back to go back to her room, Pablo took a 30-centimeter iron bar and hit her in the head. The first blow was delivered to the right side of the head, causing Cristina to fall face down on her own face. At that moment, Sergio, who was just watching, decided to take the iron bar and deliver 2 more blows to his mother's head. According to a subsequent investigation, at this time Cristina was still alive. The brothers, realizing this, decided to suffocate her with a shirt. Afterwards, Pablo took a sheet, wrapped his mother's body, and placed a plastic garbage bag over her head. After the act, the brothers cleaned the blood on the floor and started arguing for about 2 hours about what they would do to their father. At the end of the discussion, they decided that their father would suffer the same fate as their mother. The two then went to the room where their father slept, Sergio carrying the steel bar and Pablo carrying a nautical rope. When they arrived in the room, Sergio struck his father several times in the head and then asked Pablo for the rope to put it around the victim's neck. With Mauricio already lifeless, the brothers wrapped him in the bedsheet and placed a plastic bag over his head, similar to what they did to their mother. After the crimes, Sergio came downstairs with his mother's body in his arms and placed it in the trunk of one of the family's cars. The brothers also took their father's body and placed it in the same place. Afterwards, they went upstairs and returned to the apartment, where they cleaned the blood stains from the living room and bedroom. They even collected all the blood-stained clothes and took the clothes that their parents used to wear when they traveled. The brothers took several clothes and put them in a bag, and then went down the elevator. When they arrived at the garage, they found an employee of the building who was ready to wash the family car at the request of Mauricio, who had spoken to him the day before. The brothers then told him to cancel the service, as they were leaving at that time and would need the car. The employee, without questioning, complied with the request and let the brothers leave with the vehicle. On their way out, the presence of some police officers who were patrolling the neighborhood scared the brothers, but the two managed to pass by the officers without arousing suspicion. They drove to the other side of the city of Buenos Aires, where they left the car with the bodies inside. Their intention was to return to the location the next day to get rid of the car and the bodies completely. It is not known for sure where Ana Valeria, the youngest of the brothers, was during all these events. One version says that she went out with her boyfriend and only returned the next morning. Another version says that the brothers left her unconscious with chloroform without her realizing it because she was sleeping, and they even did the same to the family's pet dog so that it wouldn't bark. In any case, at dawn, Valeria asked her brothers where their parents were, while the brothers told her that they had left very early and that they would probably return at night. The following morning, May 31, 1981, some boys who were playing in a park next to where the car was left by their brothers noticed that a drop of blood was oozing from the trunk of the vehicle. Scared, they reported what happened to their parents, who immediately called the police. A few minutes later, another person passing by also noticed the blood in the vehicle and called the police again. The police took a long time to arrive at the scene and only appeared there around 5 p.m. that day. They confirmed that there was blood coming from the vehicle and decided to isolate the entire area to begin investigations. 3 cranes and 2 fire department trucks were called to open the vehicle. but this was only possible with the help of a team from the bomb squad, who broke the car's lock using a small detonator. After opening, the agents found 2 bodies in the trunk corresponding to a man and a woman, approximately 45 years old. The bodies were wearing pajamas and wrapped in a white sheet. Their heads were covered with towels and then with garbage bags. They had serious injuries to the head region, and both the bar and the rope that were used in the crime were next to the bodies. It was not difficult for the police to discover the identity of the victims, as in a brief search of the car, they found a blazer with the name Mauricio Schoklender embroidered on it. After identifying the bodies, the deputy responsible for the case called the Schoklender's home and was answered by one of the children. He told what happened and asked the brothers to go to the police station. Until that moment, the brothers were not considered suspects for the crime, but as soon as they received this call from the police chief, they decided to flee, and from then on, they began to be seen as the main suspects. The police even questioned the criminal's younger sister, Ana Valeria, who was 19 years old at the time, but she was ruled out as a suspect soon after. During his escape, Sergio went to the vice president of the company his father worked for and asked to borrow $5,000, saying it was for his father, because he was in trouble and that he would return the money later. The vice president, as he was a family friend and had known Sergio since he was little, lent the money. With this money and what they had taken at home, the brothers continued their escape with the intention of reaching Brazil, which borders Argentina. The initial idea would be to take a flight from Buenos Aires to São Paulo in Brazil. However, there was already a large police siege, and at that point, it would be impossible for them to enter the airport without being identified and arrested. The brothers then decided to take a taxi and went to the city of Mar del Plata, which is almost 5 hours by car from Buenos Aires. There, they stayed in a hotel and started using Fogel's fake surname. Now, they intended to hire an air taxi to travel from Mar del Plata to Punta del Este in the neighboring country Uruguay. They pretended to be businessmen and tried to deceive advertising agencies to get the trip, claiming to be investors. The brothers arranged a meeting at the hotel with a publicist, and, after informing the publicist that they were representatives of a nautical company, they requested that 4 representatives be sent as they wanted to organize a dinner for 300 people to hold a boat exhibition. These 4 representatives allegedly traveled with them to Montevideo in Uruguay, and the advertising company was supposed to pay for this trip, which would later be reimbursed by the brothers' company. The advertiser had some doubts, but saw it as a good business opportunity. He then returned to the hotel the next day with the representatives, but the brothers had already left. Something had gone wrong, and they decided to split up to continue their escape. After separating from his brother Pablo, Sergio bought a horse and headed to the north of the country along the coast. He asked for accommodation in an old warehouse and told the owner that he intended to go to the United States on horseback. After dinner, the store owner retired to sleep, leaving Sergio in the company of another man who was the manager of the place. The warehouse also had a bar, and Sergio started drinking a lot. He drank so much that he ended up talking to the manager about the crime he had committed. The manager then called the warehouse owner, and together they tied up Sergio and beat him while trying to contact the police. Because they were unable to contact the authorities, the 2 men decided to lock Sergio in a small room that they used as a storage room and then went to the nearest police station. When they returned, around 5:40 am, Sergio had managed to escape, leaving his horse behind. The police started searching and found him nearby trying to hitch a ride on a road. The other brother Pablo made his escape through several cities. At one point, he also bought a horse with the plan to escape to Bolivia, but ended up being arrested in the city of Ranchillos, still in Argentina. After being arrested, Sergio and Pablo Schoklender were accused of taking the lives of their parents in a crime that had repercussions throughout Argentina. In March 1985, Sergio was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Pablo was acquitted of the crime. However, the following year, 1986, the court reversed its decision and also sentenced Pablo to life in prison with the possibility of parole, but by then, he had already fled to Bolivia under a false identity. 8 years later, On May 14, 1994, Bolivian police arrested an Argentine citizen named Jorge Velasquez, who was being accused of fraud. When they sent his fingerprints to the Argentine authorities, it was discovered that Jorge Velasquez was actually Pablo Schoklender. Pablo had entered Bolivia with a false passport, taking up residence in the city of Santa Cruz de la Sierra under the pseudonym Velasquez. He was handed over to an Argentine police commission, who took him back to Buenos Aires. Sergio Schoklender has always avoided speaking to the public about the facts related to the crime he committed against his parents. He said he feared retaliation in prison for what he might say. After his arrest, Sergio took all the blame for the crimes, confessing absolutely everything and claiming that his brother was innocent, which is why Pablo was initially acquitted. During the investigations, other theories began to emerge about what had happened on the night of the crime. One of these theories was that everything happened when Pablo was lying on the sofa at home, and his mother approached him to try to have sex with him, and then Pablo hit her on the head, and that when his father woke up to the noise and saw what had happened and attacked him, threw it at him and did the same thing. This, however, was never confirmed. After 14 years in prison, Sergio was released on parole on November 28, 1995, after serving 2/3 of his minimum sentence. During his time in prison, Sergio was allowed to attend college in prison, and thanks to this, he was able to train as a lawyer. He also studied psychology and sociology after his release. He began to act as a lawyer for his brother Pablo. For 30 years, no one knew for sure what had happened to Ana Valeria or where she was, until journalists found her living in anonymity and with a changed name. After the crime, she came to contest the inheritance rights of her parents that her brothers had. Pablo, like his brother Sergio, was also released from prison after serving 2/3 of his minimum sentence. During the time he was imprisoned, Pablo wrote a book with his version of events that was the basis for a film called Passengers from a Nightmare. The last public information we have about the two brothers is that Sergio lived in Perez, Santa Fe, a municipality in Argentina, where he worked in construction. Pablo moved to Paraguay and also works in construction. He changed his surname and now goes by the name Pablo Silva, which was one of his mother's maiden surnames. Well folks, that's it. Thank you very much for watching until the end. A big hug and see you next time.